Hi, this is Carl Rust, and I've worked in schools for over 30 years. I've learned a lot about how people learn, and I wrote a book called Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn: How We Can Transform Schools and Reintroduce Natural Learning. Hey, everybody, welcome to Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn podcast, episode 10. And last time I told you I was back to school teaching third and fourth grade high ability class. And I told you a little bit about day one. So today I'm going to talk about day two. So kids came in. We started our day off with a little pre-assessment like I described yesterday, except that day they were supposed to be looking for errors in grammar, mostly grammar and usage errors. Again, I didn't make a big deal about it. I just let them do the best that they could. In looking over those papers, some people marked a few things, some people marked a lot, and I did it myself. I always try to do whatever I ask younger people to do. I try to do it as well, and I'm sure I didn't catch all the errors myself, but we did some estimation activities where I showed them a bag of materials and asked them to do an estimate on a sticky note. And then we had like a plot, a number line up there, and we kind of placed them on the number line, and then we tried to see how far away we were. So we're going to do a little bit of that every day, just practice our estimation. Again, not a grade. It's not all about grading. It's about experiencing things, laughing and having fun. I read the first chapter of The Wizard of Oz, and that went well. I noticed earlier in the day there were some people that were actually reading The Wizard of Oz, at least one boy in particular, while I was talking about other things. And I just don't see the reason to fuss at people for things like that. It was what he wanted to do at the time. I don't know if he was listening to what I had to say or not, but I don't value my speaking over what somebody else would choose to do. So it's not a big deal to me if somebody's doing something else, unless they're doing it loudly. Like I talked about our boy yesterday was throwing paper airplanes, that kind of thing. If it's distracting or annoying, then we just kind of stop and talk about it. And it's not a punishment. It's not a, shaming. It's just, can we not do that right now because we're trying to focus? We did go to outside recess, which was nice. It was a beautiful day outside. I would have stayed out longer. But of course they have their schedules and I haven't quite figured out how to navigate. So one of our vocabulary words was navigate. And what I've talked to the kids about is when we're out and about in the building, we've got to be aware of what's going on. We've got to navigate. It's like sailing a boat, keeping it away from dangers and from great big giant cargo ships. So sometimes when we were in the hall and they were getting a little bit noisy, I would just say, remember, we got to navigate. We've got to be aware of what's going on, make sure that we're not putting ourselves in jeopardy. We got the project time, and I played some songs because it's one of the things I do. I write songs, and I played them some songs I'd written, kind of talked about some ways of writing songs. I played them a song that came from my family's history called Andrew the Duck, about a duck that my brother got when he was little. And I also played a couple other songs. And then I wanted to make sure they understood that you don't have to rhyme. We started making some songs. I said, what's something we can make a song about? And one guy suggested that we do something about moldy peas or stinky peas or something. So I started making a song about it just to show that you can make songs about just about anything. um, then I kind of let them go, and they were working on projects. We had lunch and came back, and my paper airplane kid seemed to be a little bit at loose ends. So I piled up a bunch of cardboard boxes on one side of the room, because I know that sometimes kids will want to make things out of cardboard. So I said, hey, would you like to make a house or something out of some of those cardboard boxes? He went over there and started doing it. Other people joined in. Then pretty soon we had 7 or 8 cardboard box projects going on around the room, which is another thing I've seen. Sometimes it's more effective to start doing something or have a kid start doing something instead of compelling everyone. And that way it's their choice, their decision, and they can join in if they want to. Some of the kids making collages and a few kids were making board games. They stuck to what they were doing. They didn't change. Other kids wanted to make cardboard boxes. One girl asked me to put some math problems on the board. One girl asked me to put some math problems, so I put some math problems up there, and she figured them out. She did a super job. Then later on, they're having a little art contest over there where they had, I think, 4 girls. They had boxes drawn on the dry erase board, and they would give I guess they were supposed to draw a girl, and they were all doing their version, and then they would vote on who had the best drawing. So there's lots of things kids will do if you kind of let them go. Then we started cleaning up. I even totally forgot about the end journal. Everybody's busy doing things. We cleaned up, we got ready to go, and we left. And that was Friday. So next week we'll have a full week, Monday to Friday. And I'm thinking about how I want to do things. I like presenting short little chunks of things and then giving them time to do things. So it's been a real interesting 2 days. And like I said, Monday we start our first full week. So today's topic is chapter 10 of my book. Is it the best way to learn to sit and listen to a teacher talk? So I start off the chapter not really with a story, but with some questions. What do you remember about school? When you look back, depends, some of us I still go to school every day, but as a student, it's been a while. But think back to your elementary years. Think back to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Then your junior high or middle school experience, high school. Some people tend to remember high school better because it's the most recent memory. But do you really remember how the teacher used to lecture and tell you about things, talk to you about math procedures or grammar, diagramming sentences, or all that kind of stuff? Is that what comes to mind when you think about school? Or do you remember recess, the girl or boy you had a crush on, when you were in the play, you were in a music concert, maybe sports, competitions, spelling bees? I was talking to my friend Larry, who's a little older than I am, and he remembers spelling contests. That's what he remembers from 5th grade. But tendency is not necessarily to remember what the teacher said. You might remember how the teacher made you feel, either good or bad, but maybe not what they said so much. When you go into a classroom, if you ever get a chance to sit in the back and just observe, and after a while, after the novelty of you being there wears off, kids will pretty much act the way they do all the time. Watch what they're doing when the teacher's talking. Are they playing with things in their desk? Are they looking out the window? Are they drawing? What are they doing? And how actively does the teacher keep them involved in what's happening? Ron Paul, in his book, The School Revolution, makes this point. But the idea of the lecture is a good way to communicate basic information, most of which is supposed to be remembered, is ludicrous. We know this because at least 90% of everything in a lecture is forgotten in less than 3 weeks. He goes on to observe, that is why classroom instruction is a poor substitute for reading. I'm not sure how old this quote is, but I would substitute in the quote for the word reading, I would take reading out and put in the words living. Let me read it again. That is why classroom instruction is a poor substitute for living, doing, building, creating, conversing, arguing, negotiating. So when you think about learning, you kind of have to think about the brain. How do brains work? And we know a little bit about this, but so I've come up with several different models for brains. So I think it's helpful for you to think about, what do you think, how do you think brains work? And what is that? Whatever you believe about that, what are the implications for a learning environment? So one way to look at learning is that the brain is like a cup. The kid comes to school with an empty cup, or maybe half full, and the teacher pours the knowledge in. There's a lot of problems with this model, as you could probably think about on your own. Because a cup, when you fill it up, it gets to a certain point, it starts to overflow. So does that mean once you're full, then you can't take in any more knowledge? That doesn't sound correct. But it's kind of how we act sometimes. So we get kids to sit in rows and listen to us talk, and we're thinking we're filling up their brain with knowledge and learning. Sometimes you might think of it as a sponge, but the same kind of problem exists with a sponge. The sponge gets full of liquid, it can't take in any more liquid, it starts spilling out all over the place. But maybe that's kind of like what happens when you try to use lecture a lot, because the kid gets full, which may just mean he's getting tired of listening, and then anything else is just wasted, so it's just flowing out. But what if the brain was more like a plant? So you nurture a plant, you plant seeds, you get little baby plants to grow, you make sure they get sunlight, you make sure they get water, they get nutrients, and they grow and grow and grow into whatever size they're meant to be. And actually, biologically, that's not a bad model, because when you learn something new, you grow a new dendrite in your brain. And this is the way the Envision blog, with the article, the online series, The Science of Learning, this is how it explains it. You are born with at least 100 billion brain cells called neurons. As you listen to, talk about, or practice something, fibers called dendrites grow out of your neurons. Learning is built as your network of dendrites grows higher and higher, with new dendrites sprouting from existing dendrites. In other words, you're building new knowledge upon the things you already know, like a tree sprouting twigs from existing branches. So that's not a bad model. And there's a lot of research that says that it's difficult to learn a new thing unless you have something you can attach it to. And so that goes along with the idea of dendrites. Neurons sprouting dendrites, more dendrites, so it becomes like a broccoli or like a tree, and very microscopic tree, but you end up growing more and more dendrites. But how do you get to new knowledge if it's always got to be attached to something else? What about original thinking? So one model I really like is the model of the brain as a muscle you can exercise and you can build up and you can train it. And that way, when you meet a new situation, you have ability to deal with that new information because you exercised your brain muscle. And that's kind of what we saw in the program that I ran, the alternative program that was self-directed. Because we still had to do standardized testing. In our first year, 19 out of 22 students improved in reading by an average of 18 points. The expected gain is 9. In math, they gained 16 points, and the expected gain is 12. And this was with little or no, I would say no, formal instruction. We didn't run classes. We didn't have homework. We didn't give tests other than the standardized tests that we had to give. There was a little bit of one-on-one math work or sometimes something else, but very little. Very little. So when I think about why did this happen, kids were talking all day long. They were having conversations with each other. They were having conversations with adults. They were listening to people have conversations. So to me, that was like the language muscle getting exercised. And they were talking and listening. They were negotiating and playing with each other and adults, watching videos, making things, playing computer games, riding bikes and skateboards, just hanging out with their friends and having fun. In all of this, they were constantly working that brain muscle in a variety of ways, just making choices and trying to figure out what they're going to say or do next is a great brain exercise. So math, I'm thinking, you can be good at arithmetic or you can think mathematically. If you think mathematically, maybe that comes from experiencing math, and that's a little hard for us to wrap our minds around sometimes because we think of math as doing problems and solving addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, story problems. But math is a way of looking at the world and thinking about how do I navigate, how do I estimate and try to make sure that I'm going to make it through whatever it is. So mathematical way of thinking is logic and ordering things and evaluating situations in kind of a math, it's also math science way. So whatever your concept of the brain is will kind of determine how you build your environment. And if you think the brain is a cup to be filled, then it makes sense to stand up there and talk to people, and they're filling up their brain with knowledge. But if you think that's kind of a flawed theory, the plant idea would be to nurture them, let them become the kind of plant that they're going to become. You might have a dandelion over here and you might have a redwood tree over here, but you don't yell at the dandelion because it's not a redwood. You don't yell at the grass because they aren't shrubbery. A plant is you nurture it and you help it grow and reach its potential. If you think the brain is like a muscle, then you want to exercise it. So you want to let kids talk, you want to let them move, you want to let them do things and build things and negotiate with each other, and that's how learning is going to happen. That's the one I really like. And so that's how I try to do things. Think about the future and what will people of the future need? What kind of skills are they going to need? 2008, IBM released a study that resulted from a survey of 1,000 CEOs from around the world. It was entitled The Enterprise of the Future. So they're talking about what will companies look like, or what will businesses look like in the future. So they say they have to be capable of changing quickly. Instead of merely responding to trends, they have to guide and shape and lead them. Surpass the expectations of ever more demanding customers. Build deep collaborative relationships. Surprise your customers with innovations. Disrupt the traditional business model. Be able to shift value proposition, traditional delivery approaches, and act as soon as opportunities arise. In the future, businesses will go beyond philanthropy and compliance and reflect genuine concern for society in all actions and decisions. So listen to the words they use: change, collaboration, disruption, genuine concern for society. Those are things that come when people are used to working together collaboratively and freely. It doesn't come from sitting in rows listening to people talk to you. True learning takes a lot of thinking and work on the part of the learner, and a lot of patience on the part of facilitators. You can't rush this process. You can't get frustrated with the kid because they're not moving. It's the same analogy of the plant. You can't get frustrated with the plant. I mean, you can, but it doesn't really do any good. It doesn't help the plant grow any faster for you to get frustrated. You have to allow the plant to do its thing. And that's the same way, that's what I believe is the same way with people. You have to give them time and space to develop. There's no timeline. If you try to push them too far, they'll rebel against it. So it's kind of like trying to get a kid to eat his vegetables. You can try different ways of cooking it. You can try different flavorings or whatever. Or you can shove it down his throat with a plunger. Which way are you going to be more likely to get a kid that likes vegetables? I don't think the plunger is going to do it, but that's how we act at school sometimes with it when it comes to learning. We want to plunge it down people's throats. You are not reading by age 10. By golly, I'm going to make you read. That's just going to produce a person that hates reading. So let's see. I would say it's definitely not the best way to learn, to sit and listen to someone talk. So if you're working at a school, if you're running a class, or you have influence with a person that's, how much of this can we make hands-on, collaborative team instead of teacher talks, you listen, you take notes, you write a homework, you take a test, and then we move on to the next thing. So a couple suggestions. Experiment with different ways to facilitate learning with little or no teacher talk. Allow students to do truly independent work. Only intervene when asked to. So like what I'm doing with my little experiment at school this year is I am doing a little bit of teacher talk, but I try to break it up with lots of kids doing things. And then once we hit a certain point of the day, it's project time and they do their thing. Try it. You know, it might work for you. Okay, thanks for listening. Next week, I'm going to be talking about, where is it? We'll be talking about when and how will change happen. Don't forget to subscribe so you will be notified each time a new episode comes out. Check out my book, Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn, How We Can Transform Schools and Reintroduce Natural Learning. Podcasts I recommend, Liberated Podcast with Carrie McDonald. She interviews change makers in education. A lot of times they're entrepreneurs who are starting micro schools or have had micro schools for a while. Keela Richards, Fair the Free Child. I also want to mention the teacher story, Jackie Scully. I met Jackie at the Aero conference, and she's got some really interesting people coming on talking about different ways of doing things at school. So innovators. Check out my band, The Rush Show, at therushshow.com and all streaming platforms. Thanks for listening, and remember, get out of the way and let kids learn. This has been Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe, follow, share, and leave a comment.